He lost his military dog in a mission that went wrong, not because of weakness, but because trust is the first thing war takes from you. Months later, they called him back, not for a battle, not for a gun, but for a dog everyone else was afraid of. The dog had lost his handler too. Since that day, he attacked anyone who came close. They called him dangerous, uncontrollable, broken. But the former SEAL did not give commands. He did not raise his voice. He just stayed. Then the fire came. Smoke, darkness, chaos.
I can't breathe!
The man was trapped. The dog was free. For 1 second, the dog remembered the man who never came back. And then he made a choice. This is not a story about obedience. It is a story about how God rebuilds trust when everything seems lost. Rain drifted across the harbor city of Norfolk in thin, steady sheets, turning the docks into mirrors of dull gray light. The air smelled of salt and fuel, and the wind carried a cold that settled deep into the bones. It was the kind of weather that erased sharp edges, leaving everything slightly blurred, as if the world itself had grown tired of clarity. Silas Mercer stood near the pier, hands buried in the pockets of his dark jacket. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet economy of a man shaped by discipline rather than display. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his build solid but restrained, the body of someone trained to endure rather than intimidate. His hair was cut short, military neat, brown threaded with early gray. His face was calm, almost expressionless, but his eyes told a different story. Steel-colored, alert, and weighed down by something that had not healed. Silas had been a SEAL for most of his adult life. He was known for patience, for control, for the ability to remain steady when others fractured. Those qualities had made him an exceptional canine handler. His partner, a German shepherd named Atlas, had been nearly 5 years old, powerfully built, with a dark sable coat and an intelligence that bordered on instinct. Atlas was not aggressive by nature. He was precise, focused, and deeply bonded to Silas. He followed commands, but more than that, he followed trust. The mission that took Atlas's life had unraveled quickly. Night, compromised intel, an explosion too close to the extraction point. In the chaos, Atlas had moved toward a threat Silas had not identified in time. There had been a moment, a fraction of a second, when Atlas turned back, waiting. That was the image Silas could not erase. The dog did not return. The loss did not break Silas outwardly. He completed reports, acknowledged condolences, and accepted the official language that labeled Atlas as KIA. But inwardly, something fundamental shifted. He began to question the foundation of his role. A man chose to follow orders. A dog trusted without understanding the cost. Atlas had trusted him completely. In the weeks that followed, Silas avoided the training yards. Every bark felt intrusive. Every command sounded heavier than it should. When offered reassignment within the K9 program, he declined. Not because he feared loss again, but because he no longer believed he had the moral authority to send another animal into danger. Leadership, he decided, required accountability not only for outcomes, but for trust given freely. Commander Richard Hale, a senior officer with decades of service and a measured, patient demeanor, attempted to persuade him otherwise. Hale respected Silas's record and his judgment, but he also recognized grief when he saw it. He did not push. Elaine Porter, the base veterinarian, offered quiet sympathy. In her mid-30s, calm and observant, she had treated Atlas many times. She noticed Silas's absence from the kennels and understood without asking. Some losses did not need explanation. On his final day in the program, Silas passed the training grounds once more. Rain darkened the concrete, and distant commands echoed faintly. He did not stop. He kept walking. Silas Mercer did not leave the K9 program because he lacked courage. He left because trust, once broken, demanded restraint. Until he understood how to carry that responsibility again, he would not ask another living creature to follow him into harm's way. The call came late in the evening when Norfolk had quieted into a low, damp stillness. The rain from earlier had thinned into a mist, leaving the streets dark and reflective beneath the streetlights. From the fourth floor of a modest apartment building near the harbor, Silas Mercer watched the city without really seeing it. At 42, he lived alone, not out of loneliness, but out of habit. The apartment was sparse, orderly, and temporary in feeling, as if he had never fully committed to the idea of staying anywhere for long. Silas sat at a small kitchen table, shoulders slightly hunched, a mug of coffee untouched beside him. His posture still carried the discipline of years in service, but something in him had softened, not into weakness, but into caution. The phone on the table vibrated once, then again. He knew the number before he answered. "Silas Mercer," the voice said, steady and familiar. Commander Richard Hale was 54 years old, a career officer with decades of operational command behind him. His hair was mostly gray now, kept short and precise, his face lined not by age alone, but by responsibility. Hale was known for his measured leadership style. He did not coerce. He waited. When he spoke, it was because he had already decided the words mattered. "Sir," Silas replied. "I won't take long," Hale said. Silas leaned back slightly in his chair. Silence followed, intentional on both ends. Hale understood that Silas did not rush into conversations. He respected that. "There's a K-9 unit at a coastal training facility," Hale began. "One dog, German Shepherd, 4 years old, previously deployed. Since the loss of his handler, he's become volatile, aggressive, unreachable." Silas closed his eyes for a moment. The details were already forming images he did not want. "I'm no longer part of the program," he said evenly. "You know that." "I do," Hale replied. "This isn't a request for you to return as a handler." Silas exhaled slowly through his nose. "Then what is it?" "An evaluation," Hale said. "Advisory only. Observation. We've cycled through 3 senior handlers. None of them could get close without triggering him." Silas stood and moved toward the window, his reflection faint against the glass. Below, the street glistened with moisture, cars passing quietly like distant thoughts. "Find someone else," he said. "Someone who still believes in giving orders." "We did," Hale said. "They failed." The word landed heavier than expected. Silas rested his forehead briefly against the cool glass. He thought of Atlas, of the certainty with which trust had once been given to him. "I don't command dogs anymore," he said. "That part of my career is over." Hale paused. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its official edge. "This dog doesn't respond to commands," he said. "That's exactly why we called you." Silas turned slightly, listening more closely now. "He lost his handler in the field," Hale continued. "The man was 38, experienced, KIA during extraction. The dog watched it happen." Silas felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not sharp, but deep. He said nothing. "He hasn't trusted anyone since," Hale added. "Neither have you." The words were not accusatory. They were factual. That made them harder to dismiss. "I won't train him," Silas said after a long moment. "We're not asking that," Hale replied. "Just come see him." Silas studied his own reflection again. The lines around his eyes looked deeper than he remembered. He had built his decision to leave the K-9 program carefully, brick by brick, convincing himself it was final. And yet, one sentence had cracked the foundation. "What's his name?" Silas asked. Hale answered quietly. "Iron." Silas nodded once, though Hale could not see it. Outside, the mist thickened, softening the city's edges. He did not feel resolved. He did not feel hopeful. But he felt called. "I'll come tomorrow," he said, "as an observer only." "That's all we're asking," Hale replied. When the call ended, Silas remained standing by the window. The city moved on below him, unaware of the small shift that had just occurred. Trust had not returned. Belief had not followed. But for the first time since Atlas died, Silas had allowed the door to remain unlocked. The training facility sat at the edge of the harbor, separated from the open water by a line of concrete barriers and rust-streaked fencing. The air smelled of salt and oil, and the wind moved unchecked across the docks, rattling loose chains and carrying the cries of distant gulls. It was late morning when Silas Mercer arrived, the sky a dull overcast that flattened the light and drained color from the world. Silas stepped out of the vehicle slowly. At 42, he moved with the controlled economy of someone who measured every step, not from injury, but from habit. He wore a dark jacket zipped to the collar, plain jeans, and worn boots that had seen more deployment zones than city streets. His expression was neutral, but his eyes tracked everything: the gates, the cameras, the spacing between buildings. Old instincts still awake, even if he no longer trusted what they led him toward. The facility manager met him at the entrance. Thomas Reed was 46, lean, sharp-featured, with a tightly controlled demeanor that suggested long days managing problems no one wanted. His hair was thinning at the crown, his uniform pressed but worn. Reed did not offer his hand. "You're here about the dog," he said, not unkindly, but without curiosity. "Observation only," Silas replied. Reed nodded, already turning. "That's probably for the best." They walked past rows of standard kennels. Most were quiet. A few dogs paced calmly, others lay still, watching. The sounds were controlled, disciplined. Then they reached the far end of the compound, where the layout changed. The fencing was heavier here, reinforced steel with additional barriers. Warning placards marked the perimeter. "That's him," Reed said. Iron stood alone inside the isolation kennel. He was a German shepherd, 4 years old, larger than average, with a powerful frame that carried tension even at rest. His coat was dark, nearly black along the back, fading to deep brown at the flanks. A faint scar crossed the bridge of his muzzle, pale against the darker fur. His ears were rigid, angled forward, and his eyes, amber, sharp, and unblinking, locked onto Silas the moment he stepped into view. Iron did not bark. He froze, muscles tight, head low, body coiled as if preparing to spring. Silas stopped several meters from the fence. He did not speak. He did not move closer. He noted the dog's breathing, fast but controlled, the subtle shift of weight that signaled readiness rather than panic. "He's attacked 2 handlers," Reed said quietly. "Both experienced, both following protocol." Silas kept his eyes on Iron. "Did he break skin?" "Once," Reed replied. "Could have been worse." Iron suddenly lunged forward, slamming his body against the reinforced fence. The metal rang sharply, his teeth bared, lips pulled back, a low guttural growl vibrating from his chest. It was not a warning meant to scare. It was a demand for distance. Silas did not flinch. Inside the kennel, Iron paced in tight circles, eyes never leaving him. Every movement was deliberate, aggressive without being uncontrolled. This was not an animal acting out of confusion. This was an animal defending a boundary. "He wasn't like this before," Reed said. "Before the mission." Silas glanced at him briefly. "What happened to the handler?" Reed hesitated, then answered. Name was Daniel Brooks, 38, solid operator, KIA during a night extraction. The dog was deployed ahead. Brooks didn't make it back. Silas returned his attention to Iron. He could see it now, not madness, not feral rage, but grief sharpened into vigilance. Iron was not trying to escape. He was guarding something invisible. "How long has he been isolated?" Silas asked. 6 weeks, Reed said. "We tried rotational exposure, controlled proximity, medication. Nothing stuck." Iron lunged again, harder this time. The fence held. Silas felt the vibration through the concrete beneath his boots. For a moment, an old reflex stirred, the instinct to correct, to assert control, to re-establish hierarchy. He let it pass. Instead, Silas shifted his stance slightly and turned his body a few degrees away, reducing his profile. He did not break eye contact, but he softened it, letting his gaze rest rather than challenge. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible. Iron stopped pacing. The growl did not vanish, but it lowered, dropped back into the chest. His ears flicked once, uncertain. Reed noticed. "What did you just do?" "Nothing," Silas said. They stood there in silence, wind sweeping across the compound. Iron remained tense, alert, dangerous. But he did not lunge again. Silas felt the weight of recognition settle in. This dog was not broken. He was unfinished. Frozen in the moment, trust had cost him everything. Silas took one step back. Iron watched him closely, head tilting just a fraction, as if recalculating a threat that no longer advanced. "That's all for today," Silas said. Reed frowned. "You're done?" "For now," Silas replied. As they turned away, Silas felt Iron's stare remain fixed on him, not with aggression, but with something closer to suspicion, edged by memory. Silas did not look back. He already knew this would not be the last time they stood across from each other. The days that followed settled into a quiet pattern. The harbor remained gray and restless, the wind pressing in from the water with a cold persistence that never fully faded. Silas Mercer returned to the training facility each morning at the same hour, arriving without announcement and leaving without comment. At 42, he had learned that consistency carried more weight than intention. He did not enter the isolation area. Instead, Silas stopped several meters from the reinforced fence that separated Iron from the rest of the compound. He stood where the concrete met the gravel, hands loose at his sides, posture neutral. No commands, no gestures, no attempt to close the distance, just presence. Iron noticed him immediately. The German Shepherd remained 4 years old in body, but older in bearing, his frame tight with vigilance that never fully released. Each day, when Silas appeared, Iron reacted with the same rigid attention. Ears forward, jaw set, muscles drawn like wire beneath his dark coat. The growl came at first, low and steady, a sound that warned rather than threatened. Silas did not respond. On the second day, Iron paced the length of the kennel, tracing the fence line in sharp, deliberate steps. On the third, he lunged once, striking the steel hard enough to make it ring. Silas did not move. He did not step back, but he did not step forward either. He adjusted his stance slightly, angling his body away, offering no challenge. By the fourth day, the lunges stopped. The growl remained, but it softened, less forceful, as if Iron were conserving energy for a threat that no longer behaved like one. Silas observed the change without reacting. He did not mark progress. He did not reward restraint. He understood the difference between training and waiting. What Silas saw in Iron was not uncontrolled aggression, it was fixation. The dog was locked in a moment that had never resolved, guarding a space where someone had once stood and never returned. Iron's violence was not aimed outward. It was a refusal to let absence happen again. Silas recognized it immediately. He stood there each day, rain or wind, sometimes for minutes, sometimes longer. He did not speak Iron's name. He did not meet the dog's stare directly for long. His gaze rested low, calm, present. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of restraint. Inside Silas, memories surfaced without warning, not images, but sensations. The weight of gear, the tension before movement, the certainty that came from trusting another living being to read the situation as he did. Atlas had never questioned him. That, Silas realized now, was the part he feared most. Not the loss, but the innocence of the trust that preceded it. Iron sat for the first time on the 6th day. It was not obedience. There had been no cue, no command. The dog simply lowered himself, back straight, eyes still locked on Silas. The growl faded into silence, replaced by steady breathing. His tail remained stiff, unmoving. Silas noticed, but did not react. He understood that acknowledgement could fracture something still fragile. Trust, he knew, was not built by being seen. It was built by not leaving. From a distance, facility staff observed the strange routine with skepticism. No notes were taken, no charts updated. There was nothing to measure. Silas was not doing anything that fit within protocol. He was simply returning. On the 9th day, Iron lay down. It was brief. His head did not rest on the ground. His muscles remained coiled, ready to rise. But for a few seconds, his body surrendered height, signaling something close to fatigue. Grief, Silas thought, was exhausting work. Silas felt no triumph, only recognition. Two losses stood across from each other, separated by steel and time. One wore his grief in silence, the other in teeth and tension. Neither trusted the world enough to move closer. Silas took one step back and left, as he did every day, without ceremony. Iron watched him go. Neither followed. The evaluation was scheduled for mid-morning under a sky that hung low and colorless above the harbor. The wind cut in from the water, sharp and cold, rattling the fencing around the training compound. Silas Mercer arrived as he always did, at the same hour, wearing the same dark jacket, his movements deliberate and unhurried. At 42, he had learned that moments of pressure revealed more than hours of routine. This time, he was not alone. Thomas Reed, 46, stood near the control panel outside the isolation kennel, clipboard tucked under his arm. Two additional handlers were present as observers, both in their 30s, both experienced, both maintaining a careful distance. A medic waited several meters back, posture alert. This was not training, it was assessment. Iron stood inside the reinforced enclosure, 4 years old, his dark coat bristling as if charged with static. He sensed the change immediately. His body tightened, ears snapping forward, breath quickening. The presence of unfamiliar people shifted the balance he had tolerated in recent days. Silas stopped at his usual position several meters from the fence. Reed glanced at him. "If he escalates, we'll intervene." Silas nodded once. He said nothing. The gate latch clicked as Reed activated the monitoring sequence. The sound was small, mechanical, but it was enough. Iron exploded forward. His body slammed into the steel barrier with full force, teeth bared, jaws snapping inches from the metal. A roar tore from his chest, raw and violent, echoing across the concrete yard. The fence shuddered. One of the observers shifted instinctively, boots scraping back a half step. Silas did not move. He did not raise his hands. He did not speak Iron's name. He did not issue a single command. Iron lunged again, harder, driven by a surge of expectation, the familiar pattern of challenge and correction, threat and response. His muscles coiled for the next impact. It did not come. Silas stood exactly where he was, shoulders relaxed, weight evenly distributed, eyes steady, but unfocused. His body offered no signal of dominance, no cue of retreat. He neither confronted nor avoided. The third lunge slowed. Iron's paws struck the fence with less force. His growl faltered, breaking into uneven breaths. Confusion edged into his posture. This was not the response he had learned to fight against. Silas felt the moment settle around them. Inside, an old reflex urged him to act, to guide the situation back into familiar structure. He ignored it. Commands, he knew, were a form of certainty. And certainty was what Iron had lost. Iron stepped back once. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was a choice. The growl dropped away entirely. Iron stood rigid, chest heaving, eyes locked onto Silas not with rage now, but with calculation. His head tilted a fraction, ears twitching as if searching for a signal that refused to appear. Silas remained silent. Reed lowered his clipboard slightly. "He's never stopped like that," he said under his breath. Silas did not respond. He was watching Iron's breathing slow, watching the tension redistribute, no longer aimed outward but folding inward, uncertain of where to go. For the first time since the handler's death, Iron was not being resisted or restrained. He was being allowed. After several long seconds, Iron turned his head away. The movement was subtle, but unmistakable. It was not submission, it was withdrawal, a decision to disengage from a confrontation that had lost its meaning. Silas felt no surge of success, no relief, only a quiet confirmation of what he had suspected all along. Iron was not testing authority. He was testing abandonment. When the evaluation ended, Reed secured the controls and exhaled slowly. "That could have gone very differently." "Yes," Silas said. "It usually does." Silas stepped back as he always did. He did not linger. He did not look for acknowledgement. As he turned away, he felt Iron's gaze follow him, not hostile, not trusting, but unsettled. A creature had challenged the world, and the world had not pushed back. The shift did not arrive as an event. It arrived as a pattern that refused to break. Morning after morning, the harbor pressed its sameness into the day, cold winds sliding off the water, steel structures groaning softly, gulls circling without interest. Silas Mercer continued to enter the training compound at the same hour, his presence unannounced and unchanged. He wore the same jacket, stopped at the same distance, and faced the same reinforced fence. There was no urgency in him now, only intention stripped down to its simplest form. Iron began to wait before Silas arrived. Inside the isolation kennel, the dog positioned himself closer to the front, body aligned toward the access path rather than the interior corners he once guarded. His posture remained rigid, guarded, but no longer explosive. The tension had shifted from outward aggression to inward readiness. When footsteps echoed along the concrete, Iron's ears lifted, tracking sound instead of threat. When Silas appeared, Iron did not rush the fence. He stood. He watched. Silas did nothing to invite the moment forward. He did not shorten the distance or speak. He kept his gaze low, neutral, allowing Iron to decide how much attention to give and where to place it. The silence between them was not empty. It was deliberate, held steady like a line that neither pulled nor slackened. Iron's growl faded from certainty into possibility. It still surfaced at times, when unfamiliar handlers passed too close, when equipment clattered, when voices rose unexpectedly. But it no longer belonged to Silas. Toward him, Iron's response narrowed into observation. The anger remained present, but it had lost direction. Silas recognized the change and resisted the instinct to mark it. He had learned long ago that naming progress too early could undo it. Trust did not tolerate impatience. It collapsed under it. Within the kennel, Iron's movements began to slow. The tight pacing that once traced the fence line eased into wider arcs, then halted altogether. Some days he stood motionless for long stretches, weight evenly balanced, breath controlled. Other days he lowered himself part way, forelegs extended, head still raised, testing the idea that vigilance did not require constant height. Silas remained still. He did not reward. He did not correct. He did not claim. From outside the enclosure, the staff watched with growing unease. There were no formal sessions logged, no new methods introduced, no variables adjusted. Yet the incident reports told a different story. Fewer lunges, shorter recovery periods, a measurable reduction in reactive behavior that defied explanation. Thomas Reed reviewed the numbers more than once. The pattern was consistent, but it made him uncomfortable. Training was supposed to look like effort. This looked like absence. "This isn't a technique," one handler said quietly during an observation window. "No," Reed replied. "It's repetition." Silas did not involve himself in the discussion. He stayed where he always stood, letting the pattern exist without commentary. He understood that explanation would invite interference. One morning, the wind arrived harder than usual, rattling the fencing and pushing cold air into every open space. Iron had already taken position near the front of the kennel before Silas appeared. When Silas stepped into place, Iron remained seated. His ears flicked once. His eyes stayed steady. The moment passed without acknowledgement. Another afternoon, Iron lay down fully, chest against the concrete, head raised, eyes open. The position lasted only seconds before he rose again, as if reconsidering the cost of rest. Silas did not react. He allowed the moment to pass unclaimed. Iron was not becoming obedient. He was becoming certain that Silas would arrive, certain that Silas would not advance, certain that Silas would leave without consequence. That certainty dulled the edge of Iron's vigilance in a way pressure never could. Rage, Silas understood, did not dissolve when challenged. It dissolved when it no longer needed to guard against disappearance. Each day, Silas stepped back and turned away, as he always did. No farewell, no signal, just departure consistent enough to become reliable. Iron watched him go. No charge, no eruption, only attention held until distance returned. Neither followed, but the space between them had changed. The explosion came without warning. A sharp crack split the air near the old fuel storage at the edge of the harbor, followed by a low, rolling boom that shook the compound to its foundations. Flames tore through a corroded seam in the tank, spilling outward as thick black smoke surged into the wind. The lights across the facility went dark at once. The power failed completely. Alarms staggered on backup systems, uneven and delayed. Gates froze mid-cycle. Smoke poured into the open yards and narrow corridors, burning the lungs and blinding the eye. The harbor wind pushed the fire's breath inward, turning familiar ground into something hostile and shifting. Silas moved on instinct. He cut through the haze toward the isolation area, boots striking concrete with controlled urgency. He knew the layout by memory now, every fence line and service path traced by repetition. Shouts overlapped behind him. Metal snapped and popped as heat climbed. Inside the isolation kennel, Iron surged upright. The world had broken its pattern. The careful predictability that had dulled his anger collapsed at once. He struck the fence hard, ears pinned forward, breath sharp. Smoke coiled through the air, carrying heat and threat. Survival pressed to the front of everything. Silas reached the manual release. The smoke was already thick around his legs. Heat rolled across his face. Leaving Iron inside would kill him. There was no calculation to make. Silas pulled the release. The gate slid open with a grinding scream. Iron burst free. He shot forward, fast and low, cutting through smoke and debris with pure instinct. For a brief moment, he did not look back. The open compound meant distance. Distance meant life. Silas turned to retreat. The ground failed beneath him. A section of dockside railing, warped by heat, collapsed inward. Silas went down hard, pain flashing through his leg as twisted metal pinned him to the concrete. Heat pressed close, searing through fabric. Smoke shortened every breath. He did not shout. He tested the pressure once and knew it would not give. Fire crept nearer, snapping along fuel residue. He braced, conserving movement, waiting. Iron skidded to a stop. He turned sharply, smoke blurring the space behind him. Through the haze he saw Silas, still, controlled, not reaching, not calling. The man who had never chased him, never cornered him, never demanded. Iron hesitated. In that suspended second, something else rose. Unbidden, unwanted. Another man. A different harbor. A different night. A hand on his collar, steady and familiar. A voice he had followed without question. Then noise. Light. The sudden absence that had never been explained. Iron remembered standing where someone should have been, waiting. The memory struck like pressure behind the eyes, not an image, but a feeling. The moment trust had turned into silence. The moment he had learned what it meant to be left. The fire cracked, metal screamed. Iron looked forward toward escape, then back at Silas. Silas met his gaze and did nothing. No plea, no command, no promise. Iron made his choice. He turned back. He moved with precision, navigating the hottest metal, teeth gripping Silas's jacket near the shoulder. He pulled, adjusted his stance, pulled again. The fabric tore slightly. The pressure eased. Silas shifted, then slid free as Iron dragged him clear of the collapsed railing. A final pull broke him loose. Silas rolled away, coughing hard, lungs burning. Hands reached through the smoke as others rushed in, pulling him farther from the fire. Through it all, Iron stayed close, body tense, scanning, ready. When the immediate danger passed and the fire crews took control, Iron did not run. He stood beside Silas, not because he was ordered, not because he was trained, but because, once before, he had stayed too long waiting for someone who never came back. This time, he chose not to leave. Silas lay on the ground, breath finally steadying, eyes fixed on the gray sky above. Through the haze, he felt Iron's presence, solid, deliberate, returned. Trust had not been commanded. It had remembered its way home. The fire left scars that lingered longer than the smoke. Days after the incident, the harbor returned to its steady rhythm, but the training facility carried a different quiet. Charred metal was cleared away. Power lines were restored. The compound resumed its routines, though with a caution that settled into the air like a held breath. Some damage could be repaired quickly. Other things required time. Silas recovered without ceremony. He declined rest beyond what was necessary, moving carefully but deliberately, his gait measured, his presence unchanged. He returned to the compound as he always had, at the same hour, standing at the same distance. Iron met him there, alert and steady, no longer pacing the fence line as if guarding against disappearance. They did not speak of the fire. They did not need to. The meeting with command came quietly, without urgency or spectacle. A small office overlooking the docks, windows streaked with salt, the low hum of the harbor beyond the glass. Papers rested untouched on the table between them, as if the decision had already been made and the meeting existed only to honor it. Commander Hale spoke first. "What happened out there wasn't training," he said. "It wasn't protocol." Silas nodded once. He did not argue. Hale continued. "But it showed us something we couldn't measure before." Silas listened without interruption. He had learned when silence carried more weight than defense. "We want you back in the K-9 program," Hale said. "Officially. To work with Iron, not under standard methods. A special track. Limited exposure. Slow progression." Silas did not answer immediately. He thought of Atlas, not as an image, but as a presence that had shaped him. He thought of the certainty he had once carried and the doubt that followed its loss. He thought of Iron's hesitation in the smoke, the memory that had pulled him back, the choice that had not been commanded. "I won't replace what was lost," Silas said at last. Hale nodded. "That's not what we're asking." Silas looked out the window, toward the docks where water moved endlessly past steel and stone. "And I won't force him into anything he hasn't chosen." "That's why this will work," Hale replied. Silas agreed, not as a return to who he had been, but as a continuation of who he had become. The transition was quiet. No announcements, no ceremony, a new schedule posted, a revised protocol written in margins rather than bold text. Iron's isolation status was adjusted. The reinforced fence remained, but the space beyond it began to matter again. Silas and Iron resumed their pattern. Same hour, same distance, same silence. But now, when Silas stepped back, Iron did not retreat to the shadows. He remained near the fence, watching, steady, and present. Sometimes he sat. Sometimes he stood. Once, briefly, he lay down with his head resting against the concrete, eyes open, aware. Trust did not arrive fully formed. It arrived in fragments, inconsistency, in choice repeated without demand. Silas did not issue commands. He did not need to. He had learned that trust, once broken, did not return through force or apology. It returned through restraint, through staying, through allowing another being the dignity of deciding where to stand. At the edge of the harbor, beneath a sky that shifted endlessly but no longer threatened, a man and a dog began again. Not to erase the past, not to replace the dead, but to prove that what had been shattered could still be rebuilt. One quiet step at a time. Together. Silas did not save Iron with commands or strength. Iron did not return because he was trained to obey. They found each other again because trust was offered without force. This is how God often works in our lives, not by erasing loss, not by undoing pain, but by placing the right soul beside us when we are ready to choose again. In everyday life, many people carry hidden wounds. A broken relationship, a betrayal, a loss that taught them to guard their hearts. Like Iron, they may appear distant or angry, but deep inside they are waiting for proof that not everyone leaves. And like Silas, we are sometimes afraid to love again, afraid to lead, afraid to trust God after disappointment. But faith is not about control. Faith is about showing up consistently, about staying gentle, about believing that God can rebuild what was broken, one quiet step at a time. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may be waiting in silence. Leave a comment and tell us what this story meant to you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, healing, and quiet courage. May God bless you, protect you, and restore what you thought was lost. If you believe, comment Amen.